Will Russia start World War III? Recently, Tucker Carlson conducted an interview with Putin. The president of the Russian Federation tried to convince us that he does not seek an expansion of hostilities and awaits peaceful negotiations.
Это противоречит здравому смыслу. Втягиваться в какую-то глобальную войну.
Can we trust him? In this video, we will determine, are Russia's military intentions limited to Ukraine, or do they extend to other European countries? What are the current precursors to global wars? Does Vladimir Putin want to escalate the war, and what steps is he taking to achieve that? Which countries are primarily at risk? Answering all these questions requires a deep analysis of Russian politics, history, and external circumstances. Humanity has already endured two major global international wars. And although Putin's intentions are often compared to the second, it's more accurate to examine the contemporary precursors to the First World War. Nevertheless, today we'll try to understand where the current situation in international geopolitics is leading us. So, let's start by establishing the reasons for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is it driven by a desire to conquer Europe? Or is it a personal vendetta against a neighboring country? The Russian government does not specify specific goals, vaguely stating demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, as well as the protection of Donbass. Therefore, we need to delve into the past. After the collapse of the USSR, some republics wanted to unite into a new union state. However, Ukraine managed to hold a referendum in which 90% of the republic's residents voted for independence. It was Ukraine's refusal that prevented such a union from happening. Interestingly, the first country to recognize Ukraine's sovereignty was Poland. The referendum took place on December 1st, 1991, and on December 3rd, Lech Walesa sent a congratulatory telegram to the president of the neighboring republic. Many Russian politicians were unhappy with this development. For example, the first Russian ambassador to Ukraine described the country's independence as a transitional period. He also stated that if the residents of Crimea expressed a desire for self-determination, Russia would support this choice. These and many other familiar narratives can be found in an article in the Financial Times dated March 17, 1993. The relevance of these themes is astonishing. It is worth noting that tensions eased when Ukraine participated in the nuclear disarmament program. In return, it received financial payments and security guarantees from Russia and the United States. However, despite this, relations between the countries deteriorated slowly until 2014. Obviously, the Kiev Euromaidan of 2013-2014 did not sit well with the Russian elite. No matter how much Putin talked about Nazis in Ukraine, what scared him the most were scenes where Kyiv welcomed a former political prisoner from Russia with cries of, "Russia, rise up."
Россия, вставай!
His thoughts about the necessity of reclaiming Ukraine became entangled with emotions and spurred him to action. Hence, we witnessed the invasion of the eastern part of Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. Why did he decide to revisit this conflict almost 10 years later? In our view, this is partly due to domestic political problems. Putin's rating was plummeting rapidly due to the actions of Alexei Navalny and the Anti-Corruption Foundation, as well as unpopular decisions such as raising the retirement age and failing to provide assistance to the population during the pandemic. Surprisingly, his solution to boost his rating was likely a small, victorious war. The annexation of Crimea was incredibly positively received by Russian citizens. And another conquest, according to his plan, was supposed to lift the spirits of the citizens before the upcoming elections. This war was supposed to end within 2 weeks, according to the most optimistic estimates, and according to statements by American intelligence agencies, Kiev was supposed to fall within 3 days. As you can see, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine has been ongoing for over 2 years now. So why would a huge country like Russia be planning a world war if it can't handle Ukraine? Everything we've discussed above indicates that the conflict is only between these two states. Before diving into historical analysis, we kindly ask you to subscribe and like this video. This will signal to YouTube algorithms that the video is engaging to users and help promote its reach. Let's indeed remember the most important precursors that led us to the First World War. Decline of old empires, formation of alliances, militarism and arms race, rise of nationalism and right-wing ideologies, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. It is evident that there were many more reasons and circumstances, but the main of these premises can be seen today. For example, when it comes to the arms race, Russia inherited a huge legacy of unused and mothballed weapons from the Soviet past. In Europe and the United States, we see a clear acceleration in the production of weapons. The rise of nationalism is driven by a reaction to the immigration problem in many countries around the world. As for the formation of alliances, this is a rather blurred topic. For example, we can definitely highlight NATO as an obvious military alliance, but Russia's cooperation with Middle Eastern countries, or with North Korea, is not regulated by special treaties, although these connections help allies exchange weapons. And of course, the political assassination of Alexei Navalny, accompanied by inhumane circumstances, is definitely a symbolic crime. However, even though some of the premises are indeed similar, this does not necessarily mean they will lead us to a new world war. The main question is whether Vladimir Putin wants this. To answer this, let's turn to the words of Alexei Venediktov, a rather specific Russian journalist who was close to the president before the war. He considers himself Putin's main researcher and even his biographer. In one interview, Venediktov stated that he noticed a change in the behavior of his research subject.
Учебники. Возникла миссия восстановления, объединения, соединения Российской империи, русского мира, неважно чего, СССР.
He believes that after the annexation of Crimea, Vladimir Putin believed in his so-called mission. It is to restore, unite, and reunite the Russian Empire, the Russian world, or the USSR. Putin prefers this formulation of the ultimate goal because it has no clearly defined end and can be pursued for the rest of his life. Moreover, we can turn to an interview from 1991, where Putin was just the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg.
И в этой связи мне бы хотелось два слова сказать о той трагедии, которую мы переживаем сегодня, а именно трагедии распада нашего государства. Иначе как трагедии это не назовешь.
Thus, more than 30 years ago, Putin considered it a tragedy and saw the process of the USSR's collapse as the division of the state into non-existent principalities. What is interesting in the internal politics of the Russian Federation today is the complete absence of reflections on the future. For example, the desire to stop the current war depends on the position of the Russian army, that is, attacking, retreating. And the desire to lift sanctions is completely absent, except perhaps for Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of Chechnya, who once stated that he was ready to exchange Ukrainian prisoners in exchange for lifting sanctions against his family. But then he wrote that he was just joking. Thus, the visible desire to develop the economy in Russia affects only the natural resources sector and the military-industrial complex, with one exception, Putin's long-term reform in the military accounting sphere, namely amendments to the law on military duty and military service of April 14, 2023. It creates a digital military accounting containing all the data of potential conscripts. The accompanying decrees introduced the following draft rules: registration for military accounting without a personal visit, electronic summons via the state application, presumption of receipt of summons, that is, it is considered received within 7 days of its issuance, regardless of the actions of the conscript. From the date of receiving the summons, the following restrictions are imposed on the individual. prohibition on registering a private business, prohibition on registering property rights, prohibition on operating a vehicle, prohibition on concluding a credit agreement, prohibition on leaving the country. It is assumed that with the help of such a system, a gradual, systematic conscription into the army will be possible rather than a single mass mobilization, as happened in Russia in 2022. In general, this law demonstrates a vector towards gradual militarization of the country. Regarding Russia, it is necessary to carefully monitor the decisions made by Putin, not what he or his diplomats say. However, just like any other country, it would also be useful to delve deeper into the assassination of Alexei Navalny. Attention should be paid to the external circumstances of his death, the interview with Carlson, the upcoming elections in Russia, the parallel assassination of a pilot saboteur in Spain, preliminary rumors about a possible exchange of Navalny. If Putin wanted to improve relations with the West, he would try to demonstrate adequacy, rationality, and readiness to seek compromises. Such a demonstrative toughening of conditions for the main political prisoner, followed by his blatant murder and refusal to hand over the body to his mother, could be a simple, readable signal to the entire world. Moreover, this authoritarian politician loves to draw red lines and probably crosses them himself. In his interview, Tucker Carlson asked Putin under what circumstances he could attack Poland, Lithuania, or another country.
Только в одном случае, если со стороны Польши будет нападение на Россию. Поэтому, почему? Потому что у нас нет никаких интересов. Ни в Польше, ни в Латвии, нигде. Зачем нам это?
The president of Russia gave a very evasive answer because the reasons for the full-scale invasion of Ukraine were a burnt military vehicle and a tiny fortification on the border, which is difficult to call anything other than a booth in the forest. No one remembers them anymore, but even in 2022, these provocations looked unrealistic. Therefore, a formal pretext for invasion of the Baltic countries could also be easily invented. Why do you think everyone pays attention to the Baltics first? The fact is that Russia has one isolated region with its center in Kaliningrad. The old name of the city is Königsberg. This region has a connection with Russia through the Baltic Sea, as well as a connection with Belarus through Suwalki. This place is often called the most dangerous in Europe, and in many documents it is referred to as the Suwalki Gap. The width of this corridor is less than 100 kilometers. If you look at the map, you can see that the corridor separates the Baltic countries from other NATO allies. Just recently, the German publication Bild, citing a secret document from its government, published a likely plan for the development of war in this area. According to this scenario, Russia should partially mobilize its army again and, together with Belarus, try to cut off Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from support from Europe. Bild even showed a diagram of a possible war in this region. It is assumed that NATO exercises will follow this plan. By the way, this scenario is based on the fact that actions will begin in December 24th, since this period will coincide with the change of president in the United States. And therefore, it will be the most favorable time for a sudden attack. If during 24 we notice an increase in hybrid attacks and provocations in the Baltic countries, then Putin really intends to implement such a plan. And until then, this scenario remains only on paper. This is why we believe that the international community must be prepared for the escalation of war. Yes, it may not happen, but precisely in that case, if Eastern Europe and NATO members show their readiness. Also, Putin's decisions will certainly be influenced by the success or failure on the front with Ukraine. Let us explain to you what the logic of the Russian president looks like. Vladimir Putin always has several options for events to unfold. It is characteristic of him to give different or even contradictory instructions to his special services and close politicians. That is why the start of the war in Ukraine came as a complete shock to many members of the Russian elite. At the same time, American intelligence agencies and numerous international independent media outlets were sounding the alarm about this for months. It seems that, in front of the president of Russia, there are many folders, similar to the ones he showed Tucker Carlson. Each folder contains one of the decisions that will change the future of his country. His subordinates know the contents of different folders and suspect that someday he will open one of them. But only Putin himself decides which plan and at what moment he will implement it.